All right. Hi, this is Hilary Wilson with Folklore Podcast. Today we're speaking with author David Castleton about his book Church Curiosities, Strange Objects and Bizarre Legends, available for purchase in the link below. This book is a survey of all of the surprising and unusual artifacts, practices, legends, and more surrounding churches throughout the UK and Ireland. Yeah, so welcome, David. Why don't you just tell us a bit about yourself?
Okay, so I'm David Castleton. I write both fiction and non-fiction. So I won the 2019 Go Gothic Short Fiction Prize for one of my short stories. I've also got a novel, The Standing Water, out on Amazon. And my latest book is this little one here. As you mentioned, Church Curiosities, Strange Objects and Bizarre Legends. I should just say, actually, that it doesn't include Ireland, but it includes the whole of Britain, so Wales, Scotland, England, and some of the smaller islands around the coast as well.
So, how did you first get started in the study of rural folklore?
Well, I guess I've always been quite interested in this sort of thing ever since I was a child. You know, when I was a child, I loved ghost stories, things like this. I used to badger my parents to buy me books about ghosts, and then I'd be too scared to go to sleep at night. And I guess I've always had this interest. It might have waxed and waned a bit over the years, but when I began writing my novel, The Standing Water, that was in a sort of rural setting. It's like a very dark Gothic novel in a rural setting in 1980s Northern England, and I started putting in legends and weird bits of folklore to like spice up the novel, some of which I'd actually heard people talking about, some of which I invented myself or I learned in some other ways. And I think that kind of rekindled my interest in all this sort of thing. And when I got on Twitter and started kind of promoting the book, I was tweeting a lot of folklore and stuff. And the kind of folklore myth, it almost took over in a way. I became kind of quite obsessed with it and all the stuff I was learning. And then I started my blog. I should have mentioned I'm a blogger as well. You can see my blog at davidcastleton.net, and that's about kind of the Gothic, folklore, fakelore, the weird and quirky, and that also kind of deepened my interest. So I guess that's kind of where it came from, really.
Yeah, I found it interesting how easy it is to spread folklore now with the internet being around. I think that it's really rekindled a lot of people's interests with how easy it is to, spread more little-known legends.
Yeah. People love it as well. I mean, there's quite a big folklore community on Twitter, and perhaps it's becoming more popular. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. I've been impressed by how many interesting little tidbits I see every day browsing through Twitter. And it's been particularly interesting with how much folklore has begun picking up.
Folklore is an interesting one. And what is folklore? What's folklore? What are the borders between?
Yeah. There was an interesting talk I heard on Slender Man many years back with how quickly that spread and how that kind of has become an actual bit of folklore now.
Yeah, I mean, folklore can morph into folklore sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I found that really interesting. So I was curious, you already mentioned it a little bit, but did you do in-person interviews for your book?
No, I didn't. I mean, the book it takes in quite a big area, as I said before. It's
certainly
right from like the Orkney Islands down to the Channel Islands, all over England, Scotland, and Wales. And unfortunately, because of budgets, there's no way I could have travelled around the UK and
certainly
visited all these sites. I mean, transport's expensive in the UK, and there's no way I could have done it. So a lot of it was me kind of reading old kind of folklore books, things like this. So kind of folklore books I'd sort of dug up that were from the kind of 70s, 80s, and they were quoting like much earlier books. And I mean, some of it's from my own knowledge as well, just like tales I heard growing up, things like that. I put some of those in, local legends from where I am in Yorkshire, in the north of England. But I didn't actually do in-person interviews. Some of the secondary sources I used did make use of in-person interviews, but I didn't do any myself.
Yeah, I was really curious about it because just about a week after I read your book, when I was out doing an animal call of all things,
Mm.
a person came up to me while I was looking for the animal I was catching, and said to me, "Did you know that this vulture you're trying to get is right off of Ghost Road?" And without any prompting whatsoever, he started telling me a very classic story of a ghost
Mm.
car that used to come around
Oh
in the
yeah,
60s.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that was
yeah,
something that always struck me about rural folklore in particular. Just
yeah.
stories pop up where you least expect them.
Yeah, I just love all that stuff. It's like it's interesting how folklore evolves as well. Like we used to have kind of a lot of legends in the UK about like headless riders of horses and
Hmm.
things like this, and ghostly horse riders, and seems to have updated now to ghostly bicyclists.
That's
But it's a very
fantastic.
similar, it's a very similar kind of myth, but it's the horse has been replaced with a bicycle.
I would love to hear a headless
Yeah,
bicyclist story.
maybe next it will be headless guy on an electric scooter or something.
I would love that.
Yeah,
That's definitely a story I want to hear.
yeah.
Um, One of the more interesting
Mm,
stories that kind of fascinated me, well, there's actually a couple, but when you were talking about older sources,
mm,
um, there was a story about, is it the Redstone monolith?
yeah,
That an antiquarian writing about it was talking about how it sunk deep into the earth, as deep as it was high, and that skulls were
yeah,
found.
yeah,
And that was just utterly fascinating to me, how
yeah.
something that potentially came from perhaps an early sacrificial site then
Mm,
turned into the devil's lance sinking into the
yeah,
ground.
yeah, yeah.
And another thing that really stuck with me was the prevalence of Robin Hood stories.
Mm,
The
mm,
idea
mm,
of this is the grave, and so
yeah,
this is the grave of Little John. Oh, we measured the
yeah,
corpse, and this was
yeah,
how
yeah,
how high he was. And
yeah,
it it was interesting to me how there was such a focus on, we know this is true because we measured it, or
yeah.
we looked into it, and how the truth of these stories, whether or not they were actually true, becomes secondary to
Mm, mm,
the idea of, this is the symbolism of it, this is
yeah,
what it means to us.
yeah.
And so do you feel that stories like these are more important for their symbolic value now, rather than the potential veracity of them?
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
I mean, the whole thing about folklore is, I don't want to sound too cynical, but you're sort of dealing with things which probably aren't literally true, you know.
Yes.
So, so it's all about the kind of like stories people weave around something, and like you said, the symbolism in those stories. And it's just interesting because you do get very similar symbolism cropping up, in different parts of the world and
Hmm.
across the ages, like giants, as you were mentioning. There's like so much giant folklore, and there's a lot here in the UK, but you can find it all over the world.
Oh, certainly.
um, the idea that giants kind of were responsible for creating certain landmarks, or we've got a myth here that giants built Stonehenge and things like this. In America, actually, I did a blog post about the Cardiff giant. Have you heard of that one?
Oh, yes.
That's a really interesting story. That is like a fake um, giant that was meant to be one of the Nephilim from the Bible.
We still actually get
Yeah,
people arguing that he was real.
seriously.
Yes, seriously. I think that it was about 6 years ago, there was a big push towards giants are real and they have double rows of teeth. And
Right. Okay.
it was
Yeah.
the wildest sort of fascination that there was a show on History Channel about it. And
Right.
it
Okay.
was
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely wild.
For quite a few of these giants, like supposedly dug up across the states,
Yeah.
um, and mostly there's some kind of con man behind it who was making a lot of money out of it. Um, but it does go back to this old myth that once giants roamed the earth, and it's not just in the Bible. You've got like the Greek giants and Norse giants, and
And
it's
King Arthur the Giant.
Yeah, King Arthur's presented as a giant sometimes, or Bran the Blessed. He's a hero from Celtic folklore who is a giant. His head supposedly was buried near the Tower of London until King Arthur dug it up unwisely. so yeah, it's quite kind of deep, and this symbolism is, I think it probably does say something about how our minds work and the human condition and all this. I mean, in folklore studies now, it's kind of a bit unfashionable to have these kind of archetypes and these sort of, things, patterns across cultures. But I do think they exist sometimes. I think, the similarities are maybe a bit too striking to be dismissed.
Yeah, I think that the cult of the head as well was very interesting in how that, persisted from, earlier, possibly Celtic origins, through to if you drink from this skull, then your chest ailments will go away.
That was one of my favorite stories from the book, the saint's skull. You drank from it, the waters were holy well.
It was utterly fascinating to me that persisted up through 1947. Just the idea of something lasting, that far into modernity, and it just really blew my mind. That and the tale of Cromwell's head being verified in the 1960s. Like that just really blew my mind, that the provenance of something like that could, survive for so long.
I know, it's incredible. Yeah, it's just amazing. Yeah, I actually didn't know that story until I started researching the book, because I did history at university and I studied quite a lot about Cromwell and the Civil War, but nobody mentioned the fate of his head.
I think it would stick in the mind a lot better if people did.
It would, yeah.
I mean, just that is a riveting story. And the idea that you can actually go out and see these sorts of things for yourself is amazing. It really drove home just how much the world around you is still connected through to the deep past.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit of a kind of obsession of mine, that you can walk around and there's all this stuff all around you, connected with history, connected with myth, connected with various people. And most people just wander around and they've got no idea. I mean, I used to have hardly any idea of this stuff, but it just like enrich your experience if you're walking around a city or a town and, oh yeah, that's the place where Cromwell's head's buried, or oh yeah, that's where church where there's a sword that supposedly slew a dragon. I think it does make life more interesting somehow.
One of the truly wild stories that was entirely new to me, and definitely will stick with me for some time, was the idea of the Dane skins.
Oh yes, yeah.
That there could be human skin at the doors of these churches.
Yeah.
That was entirely new to me, and that's quite the vivid image.
Yeah. Some of them it really is human skin. I think, because I mean, I should just maybe mention what a Dane skin is. It's when the Vikings were raiding England and the local population captured a Viking, sometimes they'd actually skin the person and nail up their skin to a door, often a church door of all places. So we've got these like legendary doors in certain English churches, which supposedly are covered with the skin of a Danish pirate. And most of them actually aren't. Most of them are actually cow skin. But one or two actually are. They've actually tested them, and they actually are the skins of human beings. And they can like narrow it down to say, okay, it was a guy with blonde hair, which might, indicate Scandinavian origin, So it is quite incredible that for hundreds of years, actual human skins have been on church doors.
Yeah, the notion of a human, like a book bound in human skin, that's something that to a certain degree you might expect, but the idea of human skins on churches was something entirely new to me. And the fact that some have been verified is just absolutely wild. Yeah, and another thing that I found particularly interesting was the burial practices. That there are so many crypts around, some that we know of, some that still are being explored to this day. I don't think that people realize just quite how much is beneath the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And the idea of people sheltering in them throughout World War II was quite the eerie image.
I mean, I think where people sheltered, they didn't actually have bodies in those parts, or if they did have bodies, they were securely in tombs or whatever. They weren't actually sheltering amongst the skulls and bones. But you're right, it's still an eerie image, definitely. Yeah. You've got to kind of go down to the underworld among the dead to shelter from the bombs. Yeah.
But on a lighter note with death, I will say that the section of interesting epitaphs is something that definitely made me want to search a little bit closer through the cemeteries around here.
Yeah.
You wrote about the first woman who was eaten by a tiger.
Killed by a tiger. I'm not sure she was eaten.
I'm sure the tiger got some.
I'm sure he got some, yeah. That was a lady called Hannah Toynoi in Malmesbury, in the west of England. And she was a barmaid at a tavern. And one day, a travelling menagerie came and set up in the tavern's courtyard. And Hannah couldn't resist teasing the tiger. And she just teased it too much. And the tiger reacted. And she was the first person in England to be killed by a tiger, which is written on a gravestone.
I mean, that deserves to be remembered.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's a strange claim to fame, but yeah.
What got you interested in the epitaphs? Did you know some of those before going in?
Yeah, I knew about some of them because I just love reading these books full of obscure, quirky facts, and little bits of folklore and things like this. So I was aware of some of these weird epitaphs, yeah. And others I discovered as I was writing my book. But I just love all that stuff. I'm kind of a bit morbid maybe, and I love churchyards and cemeteries and graves and epitaphs and all this. So it was because death tells us a lot about life.
Oh, certainly.
How we bury people, how we design tombs, the epitaphs we use. It tells us a lot about the culture in which that person was buried. I find all this stuff fascinating.
It's a pity that the pyramid tombs fell out of style.
Yeah, should bring them back,
One of the things that was probably my favorite, out of all of the things that you wrote about in your book, was the idea of the reindeer dance.
Yeah.
That was such an utterly wild tradition and, such a vibrant image. Would you mind telling us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, there's a village called Abbots Bromley in Staffordshire. So it's like the sort of West Midlands, I guess, of England. And once a year they have a dance where they go into their local church, and on the church wall are 6 sets of reindeer antlers, and 6 men kind of put them on their shoulders, and they tour the village and the surrounding countryside. And every now and then, when they maybe get to a farm or pub or manor house or something, they do this dance. They're accompanied by an accordionist and a guy with a little triangle who pings his triangle, and a man dressed up as Maid Marian. So cross-dressing is quite a folkloric tradition here in England. And there's a fool and a hobby horse, I think. And so this little ensemble, they just tour the village all day and the surrounding area. They start at 8 a.m. and don't finish until 8 p.m. And it's an interesting tradition. We know it dates back at least as far as the late 1600s. I think there's a reference to it in something like 1676.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a book which was published, and someone annotated this book, and it was found that from his annotations, it had probably been going on before the Civil War, because he mentioned seeing it before the Civil War. So that dated back to the earlier 1600s. Beyond that, we don't know. It might be really ancient. Mm-hmm. It might be not so ancient. The reindeer horns themselves have been dated back to about 1065. But it is possible that they might have replaced an older set of horns. Also possible that the horns were used for something else before the dance. So we really don't know how ancient it is. But it's, like you say, it's a really strange and fascinating custom.
Yeah, it's just such an eerie image, and such a resonant image. It was making me think of the old movie The Wicker Man a bit, with the hobby horse.
It is a bit Wicker Man, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit folk horror, yeah. Although if you watch the videos on YouTube of the dance, and it's actually kind of fun. People don't sort of take it too seriously. Not too kind of,
it's just brilliant, though.
Or eerie, yeah. But you're right. It's very kind of evocative of, you know, that sort of thing, isn't it? Sort of some ancient pagan past, whether it is pagan or not.
Yeah, I mean, the hobby horse, the cross-dressing, there's just a lot going on there and a lot to dig into. It's definitely something I would like to learn more about.
Yeah.
One of the other stories that you talk about that just really touched me a bit, and likely would touch anybody reading about it, was the story about Tittles, the church cat.
Oh, yes.
You know, the stories that in there surrounding animals and how much they, you know, meant to the churches. I thought that was just very sweet. And just a nice little reminder that no matter how far back you look, you know, people were still fond of these creatures.
Yeah.
You know, I just thought that was quite sweet. But out of all of these, you know, what did you have the most fun researching?
It's a really difficult question. I did like the ceremonies, actually. The chapter on strange ceremonies, because some of the ceremonies are just so weird, just so bizarre. But I did have quite a lot of fun, you know, researching that one. Like there's a ceremony in London where there's a church which is right by the River Thames, and some of its boundaries kind of go out over the Thames. And every few years, churches tend to have this tradition where people go around the boundaries and they like hit landmarks with sticks, so everyone remembers the boundaries. Okay, but how do you do that on water? Well, what they do, they get a load of people on a boat, go out into the Thames, and they get they're accompanied by these kids from this school, which has a connection with the. And at a certain point in the ceremony, one of the clergymen like grasps the ankles of the smallest boy, holds him upside down over the river, and the boy's got a little stick and he beats water. And he therefore like asserts the church's, you know, territory over the river. And that's just so weird. It's just, I mean, I don't know how they do it with like health and safety laws, but somehow they do it, you know. Or you know, like you said, the reindeer dance, really bizarre custom. Or what else? Trying to think of some of the other strange customs now.
I really liked the clowns having to paint
clown
the
service.
eggs.
So there's a yearly clown service in one of the churches in London where the clowns come along in full makeup to commemorate I think Joseph Grimaldi, one of the first influential clowns. And and there's another church in London where they keep these eggs, which when they become a clown, they have to paint an egg with their makeup, because every clown has a different type of makeup. I think it used to be eggs. Nowadays, it's like these kind of oval stones, but they look like eggs. So
I like thinking of them as eggs.
Each clown has to paint it with his or her unique makeup. They're kept in this church, and it's just so bizarre. You know, you couldn't make it up.
No, I'm acquaintances with a professional clown, and I think that she actually went to the clown service one year. I remember her talking about how excited she was to get to go to the UK and the clown traditions there. But I just think that's brilliant. I mean, there's so many things that it would just be amazing to get to see in person. And it's just a shame that your book came out when we can't travel.
I know. But, well, hopefully it won't last forever. But yeah, that is part of the point of the book. You can actually go and see these places. And, you know, I mean, okay, like churches do tend to be locked most of the time, I think.
Yes.
But I think there's someone you can call who's got a key or something. So yeah, you can actually go around and visit them and see these artifacts for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it would make an absolutely amazing guidebook to just, get to travel around and see as many things as you possibly can. And the illustrations throughout the book, the actual photographs of many of the places were truly stunning. It was, really nice to get to see some of these, old artifacts. The pictures were just wonderful. You know, um, just one of the other things that I was curious about, and just another thing that goes back into deep history, was that you wrote a bit about the sacred fish and sacred eels that exist throughout wells. And I thought that that was, really interesting that, fish for a time were even used for divination.
Sorry, I just need to, my computer just needs some electricity.
Oh,
sorry,
sure, no
just 1
problem.
second. That's it. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so so the sacred eels and fish, yes. So there was a holy well in Wales called Saint Sibby's Well, and there used to be like a holy eel that lived in this well. And what would happen if you came to the well with some sort of health problem, you could stand in the waters, and if the eel wrapped itself around your legs, it was a sign you were likely to get better. If the eel didn't wrap itself around your legs, then you probably wouldn't get better. So yeah, I don't know exactly when they stopped having the holy eels in the well, but yeah, that was definitely a medieval tradition. Yeah.
Well, then you definitely won't get better because there's no wheels to wrap around you.
No, there's no point in going anymore.
There was one well story where it was particularly focused on eye ailments. And if I recall correctly, the saint was upset that somebody had complimented her, so she ripped out her eyes.
Yeah.
Which meant that if you had eye ailments, you have to drink from this well.
yeah, that was Saint Triduana. So her well is in Edinburgh, and yeah, apparently a prince, I think it was, complimented her beautiful eyes, and she responded by having the eyeballs gouged out and sent to him. So,
what a fantastic story!
If you love my eyes so much, here you are. Yeah, yeah, so not surprisingly, after that story, her well is meant to be good for eye troubles. If you've got eye troubles, go and wash your eyes in the well, and it should get better.
It's just an utterly fantastic story.
Yeah,
I absolutely loved that. But yeah, I was really struck by your book. I absolutely loved the stories in it. I absolutely want to visit the places that you mentioned. And as a result of it, I very eagerly signed up for your newsletter and have been
thank you very
perusing
much.
around your blog.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit about that? What you're offering people now?
Yeah. So the blog is called the Serpent's Pen. It can be found on my website, davidcastleton.net. And I try and post every 2 weeks, and they're quite substantial, meaty blog posts, So I maybe don't post as often as some people, but when I do post, you get a good, solid blog. And I write about the Gothic, kind of weird bits of Gothic history, folklore, folklore, kind of maybe the darker sides of like art and literature and things like this. So I've got some kind of strange stories about like Dante Gabriele Rossetti, the pre-Raphaelite painter, who had his wife dug up from Highgate Cemetery because he put his book of poems in a coffin and buried her with his poems, and then 7 years later changed his mind and had her dug up again. Some stuff about Charles Dickens and Edgar Allan Poe, and yeah, and just a lot of stuff about folklore, Gothic stuff, weird stuff, cemeteries, all this type of thing. So yeah, if you pop over, sign up to the newsletter, you'll get a blog post to your inbox every couple of weeks. And I am actually writing a book of short stories that I intend to give away with the newsletter as well. So
Fantastic.
So when I've got this book finished, whenever that is, hopefully not too long, when you sign up, you'll get a copy, or if you've already signed up, I'll send you a link where you can get a free copy. So that's the plan. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Then we definitely do have more writing to look forward to from you.
Oh yeah. I'm actually working on it now. I did a bit this morning. So.
Oh, fantastic! That's really great news.
Yeah, and the stories themselves will be kind of infused with folklore and the Gothic as well. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like it'll be right up our readers' alleys.
Yeah. I'll let you know when it's out.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming by today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah.
I can't wait to hear other people reading your book and what they make of it.
Yep. Yeah, well, I hope people enjoy it. Yeah.
I certainly think that they will. Thanyou.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Thanks so much. Thank you.